conference room, especially multilateral conference room. The title is Public Entrance Diplomatic Rooms Worldwide via Social Media. And that's the main theme. We will go through the general changes that are happening in multilateral diplomacy, focus on the tools for e-diplomacy, and at the end summarize the challenges for diplomacy that are posed by introduction of social media and other e-tools in multilateral diplomacy. Well, the first context is set by three main elements or three types of diplomacy. As you can see from these images, completely transparent, translucent, and secret diplomacy. As you know, the traditional diplomacy was mainly conducted in high secrecy, and recently we had a strong push and strong move towards high transparency in diplomacy. Now, that tendency that started 3 or 4 years ago was in a way checked and counterbalanced by what we can call translucency, and what we mentioned last week, the three main diplomatic breakthroughs over the last, let's say, 2 years have been conducted mainly in translucent way. We have Myanmar sort of re-entrance into the global community, end of the sanctions, which was negotiated mainly by the US and other Western diplomats without web cameras in the room. Everybody was aware of the negotiation process, but details were not revealed till the negotiation was concluded. Then we had recently Kosovo-Serbia negotiations conducted under the auspices of the High Representative for Foreign Affairs of the European Union, Catherine Ashton. And it was done also as a translucent negotiations. Everybody was aware of negotiations, but communication with the public was done mainly after the conclusion of those sessions. There were no tweets and web cameras in the room. And the latest major breakthrough was Iran nuclear negotiation, which was concluded 2 weeks ago here in Geneva. And there was even the secret phase when Iranian and the US diplomats were negotiated secretly in Oman. Therefore, we had even returned to some sort of secret diplomacy. Therefore, one has to put the use of e-tools into this context. What is the most effective way of conducting diplomacy? And we shouldn't miss the main purpose of diplomacy, which is the peaceful resolution of conflicts. And in this context, we should choose the most appropriate tools, including the e-tools. This is the general context for our discussion today. Now, what we have also is a new social context with new tools, new possibilities for interaction, for personal engagement, shown in the most radical way in this drawing. We have also quite an interesting, sometimes contradictory dynamism between requests for more inclusiveness and effectiveness. And as you can see from this photo, some of the protagonists are part of the history, especially in Italy. It was the comparison between two events, Copenhagen Climate Summit in 2009 and G8 meeting in Abruzzo in Italy in 2009. One was very inclusive, Copenhagen Summit, but ineffective, nothing was concluded. And the G8 meeting in Abruzzo was exclusive, a small club, but it was effective. It made quite a few decisions and made the breakthrough on a few points. So this is a dynamism that we should keep in mind when we discuss e-tools. Now, what are the sources of information in diplomacy, multilateral diplomacy? Usually at the end of every major meeting, we have a press conference for the public. We have diplomatic briefings usually for smaller groups. In this context, the European Union conducts briefings for their member states. And now we have social media, which will be the main focus of our presentation today. Social media, among other tools, facilitated the emergence of new actors and increasing pressure on the ministries of foreign affairs to engage public, to engage people who were not previously part of diplomatic processes. And you can see various elements why it happened, but social media and internet in general have been important in this process. What are the e-tools for multilateral diplomacy? Here you have a Swiss knife with a few tools that are increasingly used in multilateral meetings. But the most fundamental, the most important development was emergence of Wi-Fi, and it happened almost 10 years ago. We followed that process in the context of World Summit on Information Society, and it was a real breakthrough when Wi-Fi entered the conference rooms in Geneva and in other multilateral centers. In addition to Wi-Fi, we have a higher portability of computers with notebooks, and later on with the mobile and smartphones, which have been used currently in diplomatic activities. Those technological developments were decisive for the introduction of the internet in conference rooms. Another tool, a very important tool in the focus of many studies and analyses, is microblogging, with Twitter as the most important application. We have also Weibo and other tools that are used beside Twitter, but Twitter is the leading tool. You have many examples of streams of the conference room, and also practice that has been introduced, the practice of preventing the use of the Twitter in the conference room. And that's quite an interesting new development. Some events are of the reach of the Twitter. One we can call it e-Chatham House rules. There is also increasing importance of social reporting from international meetings, live coverage with uploaded videos, interviews, blogs, tweets that we mentioned, reports, photos, and other resources, and applications like Storyfy or Cover It Live. There is an application which is purposely built to cover international meetings with the integration of different tools. One important development is related to the management of text. As you know, the text is essential for diplomacy and for diplomatic work. Ultimately, any negotiation, any diplomatic dynamics should end with the text. Therefore, drafting is the core activity in diplomacy. And the various group editing tools like Google Docs, Hypertext, Wiki have been introducing new way of conducting negotiations around text. And we have also here example the use of spreadsheet, especially when the address or numbers are negotiated in the conference rooms. Another development which was relatively low profile but can have quite a dramatic impact on diplomacy is verbatim reporting of international meetings. This approach, this tool has been used in Internet Governance Forum, Internet Corporation of Assigned Numbers and Names, ICANN, and ITU. And what is basically happening is while a speaker is delivering his address, his speech is immediately transcribed. And we observe the development in this field, and that fact that the speaker can see his words materialized in the text immediately influenced the way of delivering statements, made it quite shorter and less, if we can call it, less baroque, more to the point. And another development is that once the text is transcribed, it is kept in archives. Therefore, the referencing is much easier than referencing to traditional video streams or video recording. Voice over IP was another important, relatively invisible development, but it has been influencing diplomacy a lot, especially through the use of free online services such as Skype. Increasingly, diplomats coordinate their activities by using Skype, organize ad hoc negotiations, consultations. Therefore, this is one of those tools which have been used in our private communication, but also entering more and more diplomatic coordination. It is a more sophisticated way of conducting e-diplomacy with conference rooms. One of them is, I attended one of those events, and it is quite real. You have almost need to shake the hands with the people sitting on the opposite side. Obviously, this is quite expensive facility, and it is used by big corporations, some ministries of foreign affairs. One of disadvantages, and what I heard, the reason for limited use is that you have to go to the special room, you have to schedule your meeting, while people are increasingly using ad hoc tools such as Skype. But this is a quite powerful tool for conducting international meetings. Another area which is extremely important for our discussion on the use of the internet in the multilateral diplomacy is the remote participation. Remote participation was introduced in a few major events, mainly in the field of internet governance and climate change. In Internet Governance Forum, it has been used for the last 7 years. And what we realize is that just the broadcasting of the meetings, which is currently used by UN, by Council of Europe, European Union, is not enough. It's not interesting to listen to somebody talking for 1 hour, and I'm sure that your patience is already tested with my presentation. Therefore, we, and one of the Diplo and the Internet Governance Forum, and Ginger was one of the pioneers. She's attending, Ginger Park, she's attending this webinar. Try to move it further, and we were inspired by the way how people are watching the football matches during the European Cup, World Cup, and they have obviously TV sets at home, but they gather on the main squares, and they want to watch the games with other fans if they are not already at the stadium when the match is played. That inspired us to organize so-called remote hubs. Remote hubs as places where international meetings are followed remotely, but through the internal, through the local dynamics. And you can see a few examples of remote hubs from Internet Governance Forum. One community hub in Burundi, where they are basically dealing with the access in Burundi, access to the internet, and then they wanted to hear what's going on the global level. There was academic hub in Serbia and the faculty of literature, and they were interested basically in linguistical aspects of internet governance. Government hub in Moldova, following one of the events. Youth hub in Brazil. And as you can see, all of this, those hubs basically follow the main event, Internet Governance Forum, which was conducted somewhere remotely. I think in this case in Baku, if I'm correct, or in Lithuania, in Vilnius. But they had also local dynamics. They gathered together, discussed the topic, followed what was going on the global level, and trying to, and then after that, discussing how to integrate global discussion to their local context and the needs. For those of you who are interested in technological aspects, here is some sort of taxonomy of different hubs that are used for broadcasting. On the left-hand side, you have the type of the remote participation and different platforms. For broadcasting meetings, the dominant way in the UN system, WebEx and Adobe Connect is used. Intensity of participation is almost non-existing. It's basically broadcasting one-to-many, and the level of interactivity is low. Then you have remote participation with the remote moderators, use of WebEx, high in the intensity of preparations, and high level of interactivity. Those examples that I mentioned previously are examples of remote participation. We have webinars, Oxford-style debate. For Oxford-style debate, for example, Google Handout is quite useful too. And we had the so-called, we call it internally collashing scenario, where we had to deliver presentation with one presenter in situ, one presenter remotely. We use Skype for that with the intensity of the preparation, which is medium, and high level of interactivity. What are the challenges for multilateral diplomacy by introduction of these tools and techniques? First challenge is related to protocol and etiquette. There are new ways of interaction, new types of e-politeness, new way of including body language examples of appreciation of the other side. Therefore, there is on that surface level, which is important for diplomacy, the level of sending the symbols, interacting with the others, there is obvious change. Another important change is related to corridor diplomacy. For those of you who attended multilateral meetings, you can recall that it is extremely important to follow dynamics in the room. Who is going out of the room at the decisive moment? Who follows half minute after the person that has left the room? And a lot of negotiation and interaction is happening in corridors. Now, corridor diplomacy has been affected with the use of e-tools because you can use SMS, you can coordinate via Skype. Therefore, that layer of the dynamics within the conference room has been changing significantly. What is extremely important for multilateral diplomacy, like any e-communication, is understanding of the context. With e-tools, we are losing the immediate physical context, which is important for understanding the context, social, emotional, political context. And the additional efforts should be made by people who introduce and who use e-tools to help participants to understand respective context in which they operate while they are connecting by using e-tools. Now, the real challenge that we'll be facing and where we remove all of those discussions about tools is how to achieve inclusive and effective diplomacy. And here is some sort of a drawing, and we call it Governance 1.0. Probably it's not the best title, which shows that more actors you have around the table, the less effective diplomacy becomes, because you can have really limited number of people, especially when it comes to drafting of documents. And this is the challenge that diplomacy will be facing. As you realize, the recent example show that diplomacy decided to make a step back. In the example of Myanmar negotiation, Kosovo-Serbia negotiation, and Iran nuclear negotiations. In all of these examples, we had limited number of people who were around the table when negotiation was conducted. Therefore, one has to see at what point one can allow the higher inclusiveness. Is it in the consultation phase? Is it in some sort of crowdsourcing phase when ideas are collected? And at what point the smaller group or limited group of people around the table has to negotiate the final version of the text or agreement? You probably saw the Gartner curve, which explains the dynamism in the use of technology. We have been in a, let's say, up phase for a long time with a lot of emphasis on the potentials of the tools, Facebook, Google, Twitter, and we are now on the this slope, disillusionment slope, where people are basically questioning what is the purpose of these tools. Are they helping us to be more effective in diplomacy? Are they helping us to achieve the main objective of diplomacy, which is a peaceful solution of conflicts and creating the more harmonious relations in the modern world? And some practices introduced by e-tools are not contributing to this process, especially when it comes to extremely delicate negotiations, where public presence may reduce possibility for compromise, because the negotiators will basically play for the galleries back home. Then one has to be very realistic in analyzing how we can reach this plate of productivity. What are the tools that can really help diplomacy and humanity in solving the conflicts and creating more harmonious relations? If you can see the websites, for example, is one of the passive tools are on the plate of productivity. They're now used by many ministries of foreign affairs as a tool for dissemination of information. It's not yet clear what will be the use of Twitter, LinkedIn, e-participation tools, webinars, and blogs. And I think that could be also the interesting question for our discussion. Now, this was my brief presentation. I will recapitulate once more. We started with the context in which e-diplomacy is developing or use of e-tools in the conference rooms. Then we analyzed a few e-tools, including Twitter, and we moved to remote participation and concluded with the challenges for mainly multilateral diplomacy. We have the first question from Ginger. Ginger, as I indicated, is one of the pioneers in the field of remote participation. She basically started almost single-handedly the remote participation in Internet Governance Forum. And her question or comment is, yes, there are disadvantages to public disclosure, but if there is a pre-transparency and dissemination of information by e-tools, then expectation can be managed better. Conflict can be prevented instead of managed. Do you agree? Ginger, could you just specify your question? Are you referring to if there is a pre-transparency related to negotiations or prevention of the conflict? Let me give you an example of Iranian nuclear negotiation or Kosovo-Serbia negotiation. How would you apply transparency in these two contexts? To what extent? Would it be transparent, translucent? Hopefully not secret. Waiting for Ginger's comment. Okay. Before the negotiation, then there is no public open discussion. Well, that's a very tricky phase because sometimes it's difficult to bring all sides around the negotiating table, especially when you have highly controversial issues such as negotiation between Iran and the United States. Therefore, probably the pre-negotiation phase is the most delicate and difficult. And another example was also negotiation between Israelis and Palestinians. Okay, excellent, Stefano. Now, Stefano's question is why diplomatic training and public diplomacy, consular support. Stefano asked, I would like to elaborate more on a hype curve concerning diplomatic training. Why are you located in the disillusionment slope on the? One of the issues is that this idea of just putting the materials on the website, especially in the UN context, I have now to be very precise, mainly failed big time. Therefore, just having the Moodle server and putting the materials, and the learning will happen. And now we have the latest development with MOOC. We have, as you know, the bankruptcy of the few MOOC companies and big crises, and the real disillusionment in the MOOC community. MOOC stands for Massive Online Open Learning. And you remember 1 year ago that there was a big hype and hopes about MOOC as a new way of learning. And what is happening currently, and I will send you the link to the latest article from the New York Times, is that basically there is no sustainable model, there is a low completion rate. Therefore, all in all, the idea that online learning will provide cheaper and simpler learning without necessary investment in facilitation has been challenged. In that sense, I put it in this phase. Although one can debate, is it the right position for diplomatic training? Yes, I'm sorry, Stefano. That's clarification. I refer to the online diplomatic training. That's correct. Then we have from Paulo, a public entry diplomatic room is Trotsky's dream coming true thanks to social media. Oh, thank you, Paulo, for this historical parallel. Although Trotsky was apparently behind a quite secret negotiation between Molotov and Ribbentrop. Therefore, he was, as often happens with his comrades, they were preaching one thing and practicing something completely different. But at least related to his claims, I'm sure he's smiling somewhere in the sky while we're discussing social media and diplomacy. Do you have any comments on any other comments on the Gartner curve? Because it is a bit controversial. What is it all about? I put negotiation in the up phase with the hope that it will be moving up faster. We did this curve last year, but it is more or less. I thought of changing it today, but when I went through it, it is still valid. Okay, question from Pier Angelo. Is it possible to fulfill EU enlargement by keeping EU diplomacy effective? Well, that's a good point. Especially, I'm sure there is sort of underlying question about negotiation going on in Kiev, I guess, Pier Angelo. What are the limits of the open and inclusive and transparent negotiation when it comes to very delicate geostrategical games as it is currently happening around Ukraine? Fulfill EU enlargement in the sense of a negotiating process. I think it is important for EU enlargement to be as open as possible, especially when it comes to countries that have to change a lot to reform themselves. And accession to the European Union is not just a diplomatic exercise. It's basically the restructuring of society, rearranging of the society, and deep changes which need a lot of legitimacy. Therefore, I would always advise for openness and engagement and transparency when it comes to the EU enlargement negotiations. Ginger, I agree with Stefano that some speaking is necessary on the training scale. Ginger, where would you put then diplomatic training, online diplomatic training? Separate training, MOOC and online learning. Fine, okay, that's that. Let me just ask the audience, well, there are 25 of you. How many of you attended any MOOC course? MOOC stands for Massive Open Online Courses. Stefano asked, still on a hype curve that I like very much. Why so few MFAs use blogs if you consider them close to the plate of productivity? That's a good point. And I have to admit that the reference was made mainly to the few ministries of foreign affairs. Primarily, I would say United Kingdom and to some extent New Zealand and the United States. But United Kingdom has managed to move blogs, use of blogs, to the close to the plate of productivity. Not only by introducing them, but also developing training, preparing ambassadors, introducing tools, and it is now becoming reaching the plate of productivity. But you're right; the point is very good. It's more specific, related to the United Kingdom. Ginger, along with remote participation. From Stefano Baldi, I started but never finished. What, Stefano? Ginger, I have tried but not finished. You mean MOOC courses? Okay. I'm sorry, I'm referring. Yes, FCU makes an extensive use of blogs. That was the main reference. What about others? We have a Ginger who started and Stefano. Both of them started MOOC courses, and they're probably among those who worry a lot organizer of MOOC courses because the completion rate is very low. What about others in our webinar? We have 25 participants. Let me see who is mainly okay. Has anyone attended any MOOC course? Okay, Pierangelo never attended. Then we have those who tried, but they couldn't complete, and that's the thing. Okay, let me just ask you one practical. No, that's right. Thank you. Just so. What is basically? Have you noticed the change in multilateral diplomacy? Obviously, if you have been involved in multilateral negotiation in the UN, European Union, the Council of Europe, OECD. Have you noticed that change in dynamics in the multilateral negotiation with introduction of computers in the conference rooms? Stefano, I have noticed a change, Stefano Baldi. I have noticed a change in the context of EU training, for example. Thank you. Ginger Pack, I think as much from multi-stakeholder as from e-tools. Multi-stakeholders, just for those of you who are not from the Internet governance negotiation, is an approach in which there is equal participation by diplomats, civil society, business, technical community. This concept is called multi-stakeholder approach, and it is to the large extent facilitated through the use of e-tools. Ginger, do they work together? Could you provide us a bit of a context to this question? Ginger, have e-tools allow other stakeholders to join the discussion? Well, I think so. Especially they help the technical community when it comes to internet governance negotiations, people who are generally very familiar to the use of e-tools. Therefore, e-tools facilitate their participation in Internet Governance Forum and other related meetings. This was a clear advantage that was gained from the use of e-tools. Fine. Ginger, well, I'm wondering if the advent of e-tools is what has allowed other stakeholders to join the discussion and to even demand a place at the multilateral table. That's a good question. We have a tool, we have a facilitation, they can be present, they can follow the multilateral negotiation, and it raised a lot of expectations by some people saying, okay, fine, if we have a tool, if we can be in the conference room, why we do not become an equal partner in the multilateral negotiation in, for example, UN? And that created another set of the questions, including the question of legitimacy. While governments, more or less, let's say, especially democratically, governments from democratic countries have legitimacy to represent their countries, it is questionable for civil society, technical community, or business community. They can represent very specific interests. Therefore, this discussion, and Ginger is part of this discussion, has been going on in internet governance circles, because there is a question if internet governance should be multilateral or multi-stakeholder. Multilateral, run by the UN agencies, or multi-stakeholder, run by diverse community, including governments, business, civil society, and other players. Stefano Baldi, if you include in e-tools also social media, they definitely have. And Ginger Park, right, Stefano, e-tools, social media have required diplomats, public diplomats, to join Twitter discussion, for example. Stefano Baldi, still you should not lose sight of the fact that many organizations are still intergovernmental structures. Stefano, this is the key point, and some people and some organizations have started arguing that due to the emergence of these new e-tools, which are basically tools, powerful, extremely powerful tools, we need to change the nature of the intergovernmental processes. And this is moving basically in a bit awkward way. The challenge to the multilateral diplomacy and the current way of running the global affairs is introduced through the tools perspective, not through the question of more democracy, more inclusion, well, more inclusion through the e-tools. It is an interesting discussion which is going on in internet governance space. How far one can go with challenging the current intergovernmental structure through the use of available e-tools. Pierangelo, could you elaborate on how remote hubs allow people to interact in discussion meetings? Is it an effective process in your experience? Okay, Ginger is helping me. Pierangelo, Remote hubs also connect to the main meeting, make intervention, and even report to the main sessions. It is not yet optimal, but is improving. Pierangelo, let me give you one example. I think there was one of the remote hubs which was discussing, I think in Spain, yes, in Spain, question of cybersecurity legislation. There was a local dynamics in Madrid, and they were anyway discussing the question of cybersecurity law. Then what they did, they gathered in one place and they wanted to hear what's going on the global level. What are the key cybersecurity issues discussed at Internet Governance Forum, which meets once a year in September or October in different venues. The last was in Bali, Indonesia. Therefore, what they do, they gather, they have their own perspective, they follow the broadcasting, therefore they link their local or national concerns to the global developments. And then they discuss issues, they pose the questions, the main comments. And there is a remote moderator in the main conference room, this year in Bali, who is taking questions from remote hubs and comments and passes them to the panelists. Therefore, there is an interesting dynamics between the remote hubs and the main meeting. Fine. It seems that we have managed to cover all main questions. I would like to thank you for your attention and your time, and I would like also to wish you a pleasant and enjoyable weekend. And I think this is the last webinar in this year. We will continue in January with a new series of webinars. Therefore, if we don't see each other or exchange emails, I wish you really Merry Christmas and a lot of happiness in 2014. All the best. Bye-bye.